Welcome, everybody. I'm Stephen Foskett. I'm the organizer of Tech Field Day, and this is the Gestalt IT Roundtable podcast. I was having a conversation with Justin Warren yesterday, and he made the bold statement that cloud is really more about process than it is about technology. And I really keyed into that because I get kind of fed up hearing people say, cloud, it's just a bunch of nonsense, it's just a computer in somebody else's data center. And so this, I think, is a good discussion. So tell us, Justin, what is your premise? What are you suggesting here?
So my premise is that the power of cloud has nothing to do with the infrastructure. It is very, very little. But it is important. The technology is important, but not in the way that people think it is. So putting your stuff in another data center is not really what happens when you go to cloud. So when an organization says, hey, we're going to go all in on cloud, what they mean is that we're going to adopt all of the cloud processes and the way that we organize our IT business, which is all around sort of DevOps and continuous flow and Toyota Production System style IT factory. And going to cloud, going to the technology of, say, AWS, is actually a forcing function to make that process change happen. Because if it could have happened inside the company, well, we would have done it. But we didn't. And so when you see people going to cloud and then coming back from the cloud, and they say, oh, because it's cheaper and everything else, but they keep all the processes. So why didn't you just put the processes in place inside your own data center to begin with? It's like, well, because we couldn't do it that way, which is basically the same idea of if I'm a CIO and I want to change the way my organization is structured and the processes and the way it works, I'll outsource it because now I get all new people, I get all new processes, and I do all of that, and then I can bring it back in-house and do it myself. So the technology is a forcing function to do all the process change. Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds to me also that you're suggesting that this is a long overdue change to the way that enterprise IT is done.
Oh, yes.
And cloud is literally going to force progress that we've known should happen and should have happened a long time ago.
My whole working thing that when I talk to clients and I talk to vendors and so on, my working theory for everything is IT is going through the 1980s at the moment, and the Toyota Production System has been discovered by IT. So the Phoenix project is a rewrite of the goal, and the goal is all about Toyota Production System. It's operations management, and it's been used in lean manufacturing. It's been around for ages. IT is like the automobile industry in the United States in the 1980s, late 70s. And Japan happened, and somehow Toyota was able to come out with a car that was higher quality and cheaper. And all of the automobile manufacturers everywhere else in the world just went, how is that possible? What do you mean? No. And that's what IT is doing now. So cloud is Japan, basically.
Okay.
But notice that not all cars get made in Japan. So that's when people say, oh, everything's going to go into the cloud. It's like, no, not everything's going to go into AWS, but everyone will adopt the cloud processes, just like all the manufacturing users.
I agree with that. In fact, I agree completely with that, in that whenever I meet with customers, it's about the processes. I don't care. And in fact, we have gotten to the point where we don't even really like to say the words private cloud, hybrid cloud, public cloud. It's cloud, because those processes should follow you no matter where you go. And I also agree that the hype of, oh, they've pulled something back from AWS or from Azure or something is crazy. Move around where it's cheapest to run your workloads, but keep those processes and keep those capabilities. And that's where you see successful cloud, transitions against unsuccessful. When you think it's just, I run stuff on somebody else's computers, that's never successful, nor will it be. And I also agree that we're way, way overdue for this. There's so much debt sitting in organizations, data centers and processes and business processes.
And you mean technical debt?
Technical debt, but call it process debt. I mean, How often do you see, when you go through and do business process analysis, these old processes that should have been evolved and made more efficient 15 years ago, and at least now through some of these cloud transitions, if you will, we're starting to be able to push those along. So these are usually much larger than just what IT is doing. It's a really big organizational shift, but this has been the driver, I think, that's causing a lot of it.
Yeah, IT is evolving out of the craft industry into an industrialized manufacturing.
Well, I think one of the key points, something you and I were talking about last night, is the census, right? The census in Australia contracted IBM to do this work, and it's an online service, and they built it in some form of cloud, but they put it on WebSphere. And it didn't scale the way it's supposed to scale, and they followed the same process that they would if it was going in, a legacy type of data center. And
so cloud technology wasn't enough.
Right.
Even though they were using cloud technology, it didn't,
This process stuff, enterprise IT has been process intensive for decades. I mean, mainframe stuff, I've been in customers where you couldn't make a change to the system without going through a very rigorous process and stuff like that. So I think it's not just process per se, but it's a different class of processes that are coming along with cloud. They're much more instantaneous, they're quicker. The DevOps stuff, to some extent, is pushing stuff that very few organizations used to do and pushing it out to massive amounts of organizations. So yeah, I think there's process intensiveness with the cloud, but it's a different scale or a different class of processes that are coming online that are becoming much more available, much quicker to spin up an instance in a second and take it down or add data or whatever you want to do with that thing. You couldn't have done those sorts of things in the past without even more manual processes. Now, I guess it's automation.
So is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about like ITIL and kind of things like that, Justin? Or are you talking about a different kind of process?
That stuff's been around for decades.
Yeah.
So if you bring it back to the start, though, it's not the technology that counts, it's what you do with it, right? So cloud, as we've all said, is the enabler, and technical people tend to think of cloud in terms of technical processes because that's the space we play in, and everybody wants to know how it's going to impact how they do things, right? But the business doesn't care. The business wants to know that when they move to the cloud, they have a capability to do things that they haven't been able to do before, or they can do things faster, or they can do things that they couldn't have afforded to do, right? So there is a gap, and we see it in small business so many times where they see this vision of cloud and all the great things it can do, but there's this adoption gap between what they're actually using it for. And you can put all the technical processes in place in terms of having a team that knows how to spin up, support cloud, do hybrid, all that whiz-bang stuff that us techies like in terms of that cloud ecosystem. But if you're not bringing that back to how is the business going to use it, like what are we doing differently in the business that is making an impact because we have this technology capability. And that's a real big thing that's missing. And that's where the business gets disillusioned with cloud and goes, well, how is it any different?
Well, and I think that it's not that we have process, right? It's just the wrong process. It's an organizational shift. They're taking the processes that they've used for their infrastructure environment and how they provision and deploy and bring things to market today, and just using those with these different set of technologies. But to your point, it's a process, but it's a different process.
Yeah.
And it's an organizational shift, and it can't just be the four guys that are championing and the four devs that are running half the applications in AWS or Azure to do that. It has to be the entire organization top down that take a good look at it and say, okay, we need to do things differently.
Yeah, and that's one of the lessons from lean manufacturing and the whole TPS thing. There are consulting companies that go out and implement lean manufacturing processes in manufacturing companies that teach them how to do that. And there are profound subtleties in the way the whole system works. And it is a system. It's an ecosystem, in fact. So you can't just change one little piece. You have to change the entire system to operate in a new way. So it is very profound, and there are some subtleties about it that if you don't pay enough attention, you do it wrong. And we're going to be seeing that as well. We're going to see people who've read one book on it and suddenly think that they're an expert, and they'll go in and they'll change things and do it in a way that doesn't actually work. So on the plus side, because this has been done before in another industry, we have a whole bunch of lessons that we can go learn. And there's a whole bunch of books on it and case studies and companies that have gone through this kind of business transformation. Now it's in IT, not in manufacturing of physical goods, but the process of manufacturing an instance of a computer, it's software, but the process of turning one on is basically the same thing as manufacturing a widget. And when I want to manufacture a container, just like I want to be able to manufacture pieces of Lego, and every piece of Lego has to be exactly the same within very, very low tolerance, otherwise they don't fit together properly, or they're not the same colour, and all of that sort of stuff. It's really, really hard to do that well. But when you can do it, well, now I can manufacture millions of them, and they're all the same. So if I want to manufacture containers and have them all be exactly the same, then I need to use similar processes.
So it's a compelling argument, but do you agree? I mean, Ray?
Yeah, the SPC stuff has been around since the 20s, right? Western Electric came out with it, came out through, Deming during World War II,
Yep.
migrate to Japan, the auto industry, migrating to other industries, electronics and stuff like that. So it's been around for decades. That sort of process-intensive operational management, if you will. Some organizations have been using it for their IT for a while. Some are just now adopting it, but I don't see how that really applies from a cloud perspective. But I understand it's more of a process management perspective, I guess, than just pure SBC stuff.
Okay, well, I'll let me see if I can put it in the terms that people
you
use in
mentioned the goal
IT.
and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I understand all that stuff,
Okay.
but
It's pets versus cattle. So people like to use pets versus cattle.
we go.
Here we go.
pets
Yep.
versus cattle versus
Spin up some
bacteria.
pets.
I understand
Yep.
that.
Okay, so pets is fine for certain things. But when you need something highly specialized and handcrafted, and that happens in manufacturing as well. So if I need a very, very specialist tool that I need one of, then I use a different process to build one. But when I need lots and lots of things, and I need them to be basically the same, well, now statistical process control is the process I should be using to do
But
that.
how often do you think, most commercial and enterprise customers are building cattle? I mean, we're still in that transition period where a lot of my customers they're not cattle heavy, if you
Yeah.
will. They're still very pet heavy, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And we're trying to walk them through that process of becoming faster, becoming more automated, becoming more efficient, moving to these, less monolithic, if you will, large processes.
Yeah.
But every cloud discussion turns into this pets versus cattle debate, and I'm not convinced that we're moving to cattle quite as fast as a lot of people would have you
I
believe.
agree, and part of the problem there is that IT has had a really difficult time saying no. And so when the business comes to you and says, I want this, we have a standard service catalog. Oh yeah, but I need something special. So go to Toyota and order a 3.5 cylinder car.
Well, that's not technically possible.
All right.
I know what you're going with that, but
Order a 7-cylinder car.
yeah.
Okay, that's technically possible to do, but you can't buy one. Why can't you buy one? Because that makes no sense for Toyota to build them. It's like, but if you wanted one, if there was some reason that you really, really wanted a 7-cylinder car for some reason, or a 1-cylinder motorcycle, which you can buy, they're insane, but it's possible, you have to go somewhere and get it custom built, and it's expensive. Whereas IT has tried to kind of do both. It said, oh, well, we're a factory and we can build lots and lots of stuff, but we're also a craft shop, so you can have it completely custom made, and it'll also be cheap. If you go to Amazon, you go to AWS, you order off a price list, right? That's what they build.
And they do have some
anything-
customization, but they don't have radical customization.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was going to say. I mean, that's a little bit of a
there's-
logic fallacy there. We have to be able to be, IT has to be somewhat flexible. It can't just be small, medium, large, and that's it. There has to be some customization, just like I can go to Toyota and get a different style of seat. I can get better sound.
There are some options.
Yeah.
But there are not many options.
Sure.
And you can add lots and lots of options. But the thing is, like, there's another thing that goes beyond just manufacturing, mass manufacturing, which is mass customization. So once you get to mass manufacture, if you've got a fully automated paint shop, for example, and if you've got all of the components that you need to make a new set of pigments, you can allow someone to order a car, and you only build it after they order it, because you can build it quickly and get it to them, and then you can say, well, you can have it in any color you like off this set of things, as long as I don't have to maintain a paint inventory. Because if I paint it the old way, I have to have every paint, and that's expensive because I've got to warehouse all of the paint. Whereas if I can build the color of paint when you order it out of all of the paint components, now I can offer you a customization because it's automated. So if you want to be able to customize things, it has to be an automated customization.
Sure.
If you want to be able to do it at scale. But if you only ever need to build one, then so a factory takes a long time to build, and to set up, and it's expensive, and there's a lot of money that goes into that, like AWS. They built the factory. If I just need some stuff that the factory makes, then I order it from the factory. I don't build a factory myself. If I'm not going to do this really, really often, then there's no point in me investing in a factory. But if I'm building Windows machines, like if I need to turn on another instance of Windows and they're all the same, then I need at least some factory. Or I should have some factory. Because otherwise, it's really expensive to go and build it by hand.
There's always going to be a base, right? You have your base set that you build your factory for, so in this analogy. But there's going to be requests for customization. So it may not be automated to begin with, but you still may make an exception because the business wants that. And then eventually it iterates and it becomes part of that factory.
And one of the problem with that is that the exception becomes what you do all the time because everyone thinks they're special. But what we've seen with AWS is actually most of you aren't special.
Sure.
And if you give business the option and you give them a price, and this is the big difference.
I agree with that.
It's like if you say, oh yeah, you can have whatever you like, but it's going to cost you 10x what this will cost. And then people suddenly start going, yeah, maybe I don't really need it to be in bright orange. Maybe I'm okay with blue because I don't care that much. And IT has always sucked at doing that. It's going, no, we have to have it and you have to do it for the bottom basement price. So if you go into a retail store and there's a TV there and you say, I will buy, and the sticker price is $5,000, and you go in and say, yeah, I'll have that TV, but I want it for $50. They will kick you out.
Well, it sounds to me like it's not that your point is not that cloud is about process and not technology. It sounds to me you're saying IT is really bad at negotiating.
Yes, that too.
That too, yeah.
Yeah.
But and that was my next point, right? You can walk into a store and offer $50 for that OLED television. They're going to laugh you out.
Yeah.
But if you push back on a business unit or an app owner within a company, and that app owner plays golf with the CIO or the CFO, guess what? You may not get to make those decisions. And unfortunately, process is part of it, and just real-world realities are another part of it that sometimes deviates you off of these kind of standards that you set.
Yeah.
And I agree. I mean, I think you have to force people. You have to put cost in front of them. You have to show what it does when you kind of do this guy a favor and you do this one thing, and the next thing you know, that favor lives for 10 more years as a supported application set.
Yep.
And I think that's
the CIO's job.
Yeah.
Really?
And it, there really is a compromise and a translation there because often the business is asking to do something because of a way they have always done something.
Yes.
And so, as you said, it's quite often comes through as a we need this and IT will provide it.
Yep.
And the cost factor surely comes in, but there needs to be that translation and that communication where the business and IT are actually working together, heaven forbid, and saying, okay, you may have always done it that way, but there's actually now a better way. And because we're doing things differently with the tech in the back end, maybe the business process at the front end needs to change and you need to start doing some things differently in the business to start using the technology and getting the results you want. So I think the cloud does give IT an opportunity to push back on that a little bit, but it's going to take it's going to take that pushback from IT, and it's going to take the business being open to that kind of a conversation and them being open to changing how they work.
And I think all of this, though, supports the argument that this is about process, right? I mean, if you look at it, everything we've discussed here is how things are requested, how things are delivered, what the authorization flows are, along those lines. So I think in the end, it does support that argument that it is about process, even though we get down in the weeds and the real world realities of it. It starts with kind of redefining and reorchestrating those.
Yeah, and it is a business problem because the people who, like IT doesn't pay for itself, business does. So businesses who hate their IT need to look at themselves going, it's your fault. It's the CEO's fault and the CFO's fault because you didn't pay for the IT you need.
And you're not going to pay for it. And I think that in a way, what we're saying and what Sonia just said too really kind of resonates with me, and that's that IT's response to the threat of AWS and the threat of the cloud has been to try to drop their pricing. It basically not to figure out how to get a handle on things. It's been we've got a competitor, let's do it. And back to your initial analogy, that kind of does remind me of GM's reaction to Toyota in the 90s, which was decontent, make stripper cars that are cheap and try to push those instead of saying, well, maybe we need to change how we're doing things.
But I think also that's how cloud came into a lot of organizations. I mean, years ago, my conversations were, cloud is cheaper. We need to figure out how to be cheaper. It wasn't about process. This stuff came later. But that's how it came in.
Yeah. What people didn't realise, though, and IT generally, like vendors, always talk about cost savings. And it's like, cost is the last thing people care about. They don't talk about value, which drives me nuts. And because I always talk up the value side of things. That's the thing about cloud. It's not about the price. It's about what it does.
A little bit, right? I mean, you have to do some due diligence of whatever you're doing, however the application of the system works. It's a factor, right? But it's probably not the main driver.
It's always a factor,
right.
But price is whenever you're doing a sale thing, price is the last thing that people actually do, because most of the rest of the selection happens around for other reasons, because it's like, well, why do I want this thing in the first place? And nothing has an inherent value. The price is cheap relative to something else. So what they're saying by saying, oh, AWS is cheap, it's like, yeah, but it's easier to buy. I can see the value I'm getting for it, so it appears cheaper. So for the internal IT thing, it's like, well, what I get seems expensive because I don't know what I'm actually getting. Like, I don't know what the value of the IT is, which is a bad sales job. Like, because IT doesn't do sales and marketing. AWS does.
Yeah.
And on that note, too, I mean, it does, in a way, it kind of reminds me of Uber, right? I mean, the thing is, it's not cheaper. It's just easier to buy.
Yeah.
It's way easier to buy. It's so much easier to buy that people are willing to spend 2 or 3 times as much on it. And that's actually a fact of many cloud systems as well. I mean, people have argued for a long time that it would be easier to buy the systems and build it in-house, especially if you're going to leave it running for a long time. There's just no financial comparison to buying equipment and using it for 3 years than renting space in the cloud for 3 years. But it's so much easier, and it's so much easier to do and so much more practical to do with the cloud, that even big companies that had enough money to build their own, and admittedly some of them eventually did build their own, like Dropbox and so on, were willing to spend the extra money just because it was easier to let somebody else do it.
And that was about process change. And then when they learned how to use it, and now I've got all my processes, now I can build my own factory because I know how to run one. Right now, IT doesn't know how to run an AWS-style factory, so we have to teach them.
So what's the gist here? Justin has made his case. Ray?
I don't think it's just about process. I think it's scalability. I think it's ease of use. I think lines of businesses outside of IT are adopting cloud to do things that they want to do so they can get to it quickly and stuff like that. It's not just about process. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
The jury? Sonia?
I actually think that Ray and Justin, in a roundabout way, are saying the same thing.
I think Ray agrees with me. He just doesn't like the process.
I think he agrees.
You agree, but you agree differently.
I think it's about process and process avoidance, which is almost the same thing. I think I've seen in a lot of large organizations, app owners go around the IT processes because, quote unquote, cloud is quicker.
Yeah.
Really, that's a process discussion.
It just means the process is wrong and slow.
Correct.
Yeah.
The On-Premise IT Roundtable is once again brought to you by Gestalt IT, home to IT coverage from across the enterprise. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Gestalt IT and at Facebook.com/Gestalt IT. Very original. The On-Premise IT Roundtable is produced by Rich Straffolino. That's me! Until next time, from all of us here at Gestalt IT, have a super sparkly day.